The NTSB has just released its preliminary report, and it's revealing some shocking details about the Medevac Learjet crash in Philadelphia. Some of the findings confirm what many suspected, but others raise even bigger questions, especially when it comes to what was happening inside that cockpit in the final moments. What went wrong so quickly that the pilots never even had a chance to send a distress call? And why was a critical piece of safety equipment not working for years? There's a lot to unpack here, so let's take a look. On the evening of January 31st, 2025, at 6:07 p.m., a Medevac Learjet 55 operated by Jet Rescue Air Ambulance took off from Northeast Philadelphia Airport, heading to Branson, Missouri, for a fuel stop before continuing to Tijuana, Mexico. On board were 2 pilots, 2 medical crew members, and 2 passengers, including a young girl and her mother returning home after life-saving treatment in the U.S. But just 1 minute after takeoff, the aircraft lost control and crashed near Roosevelt Mall, killing everyone on board and causing fatalities and injuries on the ground. The flight crew was experienced. The captain had 9,200 flight hours and an airline transport pilot certificate, while the first officer had 2,600 hours and a commercial pilot certificate. Both were certified to fly the Learjet 55, making the sudden loss of control even more puzzling. One major factor investigators are looking at is weather conditions. The crash occurred at night under IMC, meaning the pilots had to rely on their instruments instead of outside visibility. With an overcast ceiling at just 400 feet, the aircraft entered clouds almost immediately after takeoff. Winds were 9 knots from 220 degrees, visibility was 6 miles, and high humidity added to the difficulty. Flying in low visibility at night is dangerous even for experienced pilots because it increases the risk of spatial disorientation, a condition where a pilot loses their sense of direction. If that happened here, it could explain why the plane suddenly deviated from its expected flight path. That's one of the biggest questions in this investigation. In the moments leading up to the crash, the flight crew was in active communication with air traffic control. As standard procedure, they received their clearance and departure instructions before takeoff. The controller instructed them to turn right to a heading of 290 degrees after departure from runway 24. The pilots acknowledged the instructions and took off as planned. However, after lifting off, something went terribly wrong. Despite being in communication with ATC, there was never a distress call, no indication that the pilots were aware of an emergency, and no request for assistance.
Medevac Med-Service 056 on departure, turn right heading 290, runway 24, clear for takeoff, wind 25010. Medevac Med-Service 056 affirmative, on departure, turn right heading 290, runway 24, clear for takeoff. Medevac Med-Service 056, contact Philly departure 123.8.
123.8, Mike Tango Sierra 056 Medevac. Thank you, good day.
Med-Service 056 Philadelphia. Med-Service 056 Philadelphia.
Medevac Med-Service 056, Northeast Tower, contact Philly 123.8.
Med-Service 056 Philly.
Medevac Med-Service Northeast Tower. Medevac Med-Service 056 Northeast Tower, you on frequency?
Whatever happened, it happened fast. so fast that the crew either didn't have time to react or never fully understood what was unfolding. The aircraft's flight data paints a clearer picture of its final moments. After takeoff, the plane climbed as expected and initially made a slight right turn. However, instead of continuing in that direction, it soon entered a left turn, completely opposite from what was expected. The Learjet reached an altitude of about 1,650 feet before something triggered a sharp descent. In just 2 seconds, the aircraft dropped 400 feet, a rapid loss of altitude that suggests a serious problem, whether mechanical, aerodynamic, or a result of pilot disorientation. The last recorded altitude was 1,275 feet, but shortly after that, the aircraft entered what appears to have been an uncontrolled, near-vertical dive. By the time the plane emerged from the clouds, it was too late. The final descent happened in a matter of seconds, plummeting from about 675 feet straight into the ground near Roosevelt Mall. During that descent, the jet struck a large commercial sign, which investigators later identified as a key impact point before the aircraft hit a concrete sidewalk. The entire sequence, from when the plane started losing altitude to when it hit the ground, took just a few seconds, leaving no time for recovery. The impact was catastrophic. Security cameras in the area captured the explosion as the aircraft hit, with fire and debris spreading in all directions. The force of the crash tore the Learjet apart, scattering wreckage across 7 city blocks. Debris punched through rooftops, shattered windows, and even injured people far from the crash site. One of the most heartbreaking details was that a 5-year-old child, blocks away from the initial impact point, was injured by flying debris. The wreckage field itself stretched 1,410 feet in length and 840 feet wide, showing just how violent the impact was. Investigators calculated the descent angle at approximately 22 degrees, which confirmed that the jet was on a steep trajectory as it came down. As investigators began piecing together the events of the crash, they made a startling discovery, one that could seriously impact the entire investigation. The Learjet was equipped with a cockpit voice recorder, or CVR, a crucial piece of equipment designed to capture audio from inside the cockpit, including pilot conversations, alarms, and any last-minute indications of trouble. The CVR was recovered from the wreckage, buried 8 feet underground, heavily damaged from the impact. Investigators took it to the NTSB's lab in Washington, D.C., where they began the delicate process of trying to extract any usable audio. But after extensive repair work, they found nothing. The recorder hadn't captured any audio from the accident flight at all. In fact, they determined that the CVR had not been operational for years. This was a shocking and frustrating revelation. A functioning CVR could have provided direct insight into what the pilots were experiencing, whether they were confused, struggling with the controls, or reacting to an emergency. But with no recorded audio, one of the most valuable sources of evidence was completely lost. This raised serious concerns about maintenance and regulatory compliance. How does a critical safety device, required by law on these types of flights, go unchecked for years? Was it an oversight, or was it knowingly neglected? And if the CVR wasn't working, what else on the aircraft might have been poorly maintained? There is still hope that investigators might be able to extract some flight data from another system on board. The Enhanced Ground Proximity Warning System, or EGPWS, is a computer designed to warn pilots if they're getting dangerously close to terrain. In some cases, it can also store limited flight data, including altitude and speed trends. The NTSB has announced plans to send the EGPWS computer to its manufacturer for analysis in hopes of recovering any useful information. If successful, this data might offer clues about what the aircraft was doing in those final moments before the dive. The discovery about the CVR also put a spotlight on the aircraft's maintenance history, or potential lack thereof. Several industry insiders, including pilots and mechanics familiar with medevac operations, have voiced concerns about poor maintenance practices on air ambulance flights. Many have reported that these aircraft are often operated on tight budgets, with maintenance being delayed or ignored due to financial constraints. Some mechanics have stated that they're unable to complete all necessary repairs because of cost-cutting decisions by operators. Others have described high pilot turnover and a lack of resources to keep these aircraft in top condition. If the CVR failure is any indication, it raises serious concerns about what else may have been overlooked on this jet. There are also some inconsistencies in the data that's been analyzed so far. While the NTSB report provides a detailed breakdown of the flight's altitude and speed changes, other independent flight tracking sources, like ADS-B Exchange, have reported slightly different figures. The discrepancies aren't huge, minor differences in altitude and airspeed readings, but they're enough to warrant a closer look. The critical takeaway, however, is the same in both reports. The aircraft entered a steep, uncontrolled descent in its final moments, with no attempt at recovery. At this stage of the investigation, there are still more questions than answers. Why did the aircraft veer off course? Was it pilot disorientation, mechanical failure, or something else entirely? Was there a critical system malfunction that the pilots couldn't overcome? And if so, could proper maintenance have prevented it? These are the issues the NTSB will continue to investigate in the months ahead. The NTSB investigation is far from over, and while a final report could take up to a year, the pieces are slowly coming together. Right now, investigators are analyzing wreckage, flight history, and maintenance records, trying to determine what caused this tragic accident. So far, there's no single smoking gun, but several possibilities are being considered. One of the strongest theories remains pilot disorientation, given the nighttime conditions, low cloud cover, and sudden loss of control. If the pilots lost their situational awareness after entering the clouds, they may have unintentionally entered an unstable flight path, leaving them no chance to recover. But mechanical failure is still on the table, especially after the shocking discovery that the cockpit voice recorder hadn't functioned for years. This raises a major red flag. If something as critical as the CVR was left unchecked, what else might have been neglected? Was there an issue with the aircraft systems that the pilots never had a chance to report? That's why the NTSB is working to recover data from the Enhanced Ground Proximity Warning System, which may hold valuable information about the flight's final moments. This crash has also brought serious concerns about the state of medevac operations. Aviation professionals have pointed out that many air ambulance flights operate under tight budgets, where maintenance issues are often delayed due to financial pressure. Some have described high pilot turnover in aging aircraft that don't always receive the care they need. If cutting corners on maintenance played any role in this disaster, it's something that absolutely needs to be addressed. Air ambulances exist to save lives, but if their own safety isn't being properly managed, then something has to change. At this point, there are still more questions than answers. Was this an unavoidable accident, or was it preventable? If proper oversight had been in place, could these 6 lives, and the people injured on the ground, have been spared? These are the critical questions that need answering, not just to explain what happened, but to ensure it never happens again. Let's just hope that something good comes out of this tragedy. Stronger safety regulations, better oversight, and ultimately, fewer lives lost in the future. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe. We'll see you in the next video.